to break it down into parts and say, okay, this part performs this function, it's never that simple because everything is working together in very complex ways. Physicists have been looking at these things for generations trying to figure them out, and they can describe wonderful things about the violin, but they can't really predict what happens. Like, it's a much more intuitive approach rather than trying to break down into the elements to understand them and build them back up again into an instrument. You have to treat it as a whole, really, to make it work right.
For Thomas, the Gaelic heritage of Cape Breton has made the island a natural spot to export his craft to the world.
There's a very strong and lively tradition of fiddle playing here on Cape Breton. I think people know of Cape Breton fiddle music all over the world, so surely that can't hurt. I mean, my instruments I sell them all over the world, so there are a number of them locally here, but they're also all around. But I think having the connection here in Cape Breton and using materials from Cape Breton, and I think people appreciate that.
And it is the landscape of the island that inspires him as he carries on his craft.
I first came here, I was just learning the fiddle. I was 22 years old or something like that. I just kind of fell in love with the place. There's not too many places like this where they have that kind of tradition that has the roots and the history and kind of the connection with the culture that is intact the way it is here. I would do this any day, whether or not I had to make a living. That's not really the main concern. It's nice to be able to make a living at it. I've got to pay my bills, too.
From the Scottish shorelines of Bredor, the course leads south, returning to the coast. This will begin a journey east, along the harsh waters of the Atlantic, exploring a 17th century military fortress, towering ocean cliffs, and the entrance to one of the world's most scenic drives, the Cabot Trail. This is Louisbourg, one of the first European settlements in the Americas. By the mid-18th century, only the fortress town of Quebec rivaled Louisbourg in France's New World Empire. It was a key point of trade and defense. With rich fishing grounds sustaining the more than 4,000 residents, 4 times the population of today. But Louisbourg could not be properly defended from a land attack. The English took control in 1758 and razed the fortress to the ground. Now, 1/4 of the fortress has been rebuilt. a living timeline drawing visitors from around the world, opening a window to the 18th century on the shores of the Atlantic. Further east, the legacy of Louisbourg carries on, as centuries later, residents continue to rely on the sea. This is the easternmost settlement in Nova Scotia, the village of Manitou, or Hand of God. Residents here braved the coastal waters, relying on the region's most famous catch, lobster, for survival. Offshore, the cod stocks that attracted early European settlers have been depleted. But other species carry on, including herring, tuna, and a snow crab fishery valued at more than $100 million. From the easternmost point of the province, the coastline leads north, along a rapidly evolving landscape. Rugged, rocky shoreline disappears, replaced by massive cliff faces. Along the shores of Cape Morion, mountains of sandstone rise as high as 43 meters from the sea. It is one of the most remote regions of the province, a peninsula covered in forest. And a sanctuary for the bald eagles and cormorants that breed here. And for the first European explorers, these cliffs held rich treasures. Valuable coal fields spread over 1,300 square kilometers were discovered in the late 1600s. In 1720, Port Morion would become the site of the first commercial coal mine in North America. Ten kilometers to the northwest, civilization returns on the outskirts of Cape Breton's urban center. This is Glace Bay, translated Ice Bay from the French, named for the harsh winters encountered by this region's first settlers. Set upon the cliff faces that line this shore, the town made history a century ago, as Glace Bay's elevated plateaus and unobscured ocean views caught the interest of radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi. Marconi would choose this site to be the transmission point for the first transatlantic west-to-east wireless message, sent to Cornwall, England in 1901. Now, a century later, just under 20,000 people call Glace Bay home. "20 kilometers away, the city of Sydney is the heart of Cape Breton's urban core. With an economy rooted in natural resources, the city and the region have adapted as the coal mines and fisheries have suffered in recent decades. Now Sydney is the hub of a large tourist trade. A redeveloped waterfront, with cruise ships bringing more than 120,000 visitors to the region each year. Above the cities of Sydney and Glace Bay are the remains of an industrial era past, where steel plants and coal mines were a way of life for generations. Now, on the horizon, new energy for a new era. This is the Lingen wind turbine, a 12-megawatt wind farm, creating enough power for more than 4,000 homes. All over Nova Scotia, wind farms are rising up in an effort to escape the region's traditional dependence on coal. Here on the mainland at the Glendew Wind Farm on the Northumberland Strait, teams are working through tough winter conditions in an effort to get this farm online. Ian Tillard of Sheer Wind believes the farm at Glendew will be part of an ever-growing trend.
I think wind is, it's part of the picture. It's not the answer for everything, but I think it's certainly part of the picture. We've got a good wind regime here, and as we progress over time, I think there'll be less desire to have thermal generating plants. We've seen the provincial government here put in place what they call renewable energy standard, RES targets as they call it. So, and that increases over time. So that means that Nova Scotia Power will have to have more renewable power, whether it's this or a combination of wind and tidal or exactly what it would be, remains to be seen. And ultimately the targets look to be something on the order of 40% of the energy that Nova Scotians use will have to be generated from renewables. So that's pretty substantial.
Tillard's team has been working for months to prepare 27 powerful turbines, that will deliver electricity to thousands of homes in the region.
These turbines are 2.3 megawatts, and there's 27 turbines here, so it's a total output of this one farm of 62.1, which is actually the largest in Nova Scotia now. And that's the equivalent of 18,000 homes that it would supply.
Now, they prepare to raise a massive turbine blade, one of the last before this site becomes operational.
So if we look at that one turbine, we see obviously the tower has been built. That comes in pieces. The crane gets set up there. Trucks deliver the parts to the site, and they get put up one piece at a time. So they've mounted everything on the tower, and they're now ready to actually start lifting the blades and installing the blades into the hub. The diameter of the whole assembly is 82 meters. So the blades themselves are about 40 meters. You see the hub where it's pointing horizontally. So we'll lift that blade up horizontally and just stick it right in.
With more interest than ever before in renewable energy sources, Tillard believes the wind farm at Glendew will be here for generations to come.
These are designed for 25 years. So in 25 years, 20 to 25 years, you know, it's not a matter of packing up and going. It's hopefully a matter of coming back and repowering them. And hopefully these will be here basically for eternity, really.
Continuing east from Sydney Harbor, one of the best-known symbols of this region's coast lies far below. This is the Low Point Lighthouse, a unique maritime structure with a concrete octagonal base, rising to more than 80 feet above the water. Built in 1932, it features the last circular lantern in Nova Scotia, designed to project light 21 nautical miles out to sea. Now, heading across open water, Bird Island sits on the horizon, the halfway point between the North Sydney coastline and the entrance to the Cabot Trail. This rocky outcropping kilometers from shore is one of the region's best-kept secrets. It is named for the various bird colonies that make their homes here, including cormorants, puffins, and razorbills. And from high above, Bird Island's shallow pools conceal this rocky outcropping's greatest feature. Hundreds of gray seals, some weighing as much as 300 kilograms, congregate here. It is a rare sight, and just a small window into the life that exists beneath the surface of our seas. Now, continuing north, scenic gravel beaches line the shore, leading to the entrance of Nova Scotia's marquee attraction, the Cabot Trail. Rising up an imposing silhouette in the distance. For locals, it is the unmistakable image of Cape Smoky. Just inland, soaring over the rising highlands, one of Cape Breton's most highly anticipated natural wonders lies below. The fall colors. From the end of September to late October, these forests draw in visitors from around the world as they transform into a rich palette of bright crimsons, fiery oranges, and magnificent yellows. From high above, one of the famous residents of these forests stands proud. Here on Middlehead Peninsula, the bald eagle is a rare, splendid sight. And not far away sits the gem of the peninsula, Celtic Lodge, one of the province's most historic resort getaways, drawing weekenders from Halifax and vacationers from beyond. Just miles from its industrial hub, Cape Breton Island holds some of the world's most remote, spectacular scenery. Heading north over Ingonish Beach, one of the most historic regions of the province lies below. Settled as early as 1525 by Portuguese fishermen, this region grew with mass immigration from Scotland and Ireland in the 19th century. Now, soaring over the sandy beaches that line these coasts, Cape Breton's Highlands National Park lies on the horizon. Here, massive cliff faces, some as high as 350 meters, are part of the same Appalachian mountain chain that stretches from Georgia to Newfoundland. They are sedimentary and volcanic rocks, nearly 1 billion years old, dating back to an era when Cape Breton was joined to the northwest coast of South America. With high mountains and river valleys, the highland landscape would be a familiar sight to the first Scottish immigrants here. It's no wonder the many Gaelic traditions brought here centuries ago continue to inspire the island.
We're on Cape Breton Island, which is an island on the east coast of Nova Scotia, and we're on the west coast of that island in a small village by the name of Glenville. And Glenville is situated on the map between Mabou and Inverness. I'm just driving down the road, you're going to be looking at place names in like Inverness, Mabou, Duncragan, Dunvegan. The Gaelic language is so strong here, and with that is the culture that goes along with it. So with the Gaelic culture, certainly whiskey shouldn't be too far behind. Now the water that we're using here comes from McClellan's Brook. It comes down from the Mabou Highlands, and as it does, it travels over the rocks. So it's traveling, it's picking up character from the granite, from the marble. It's running over the roots of the apple trees, the maple trees, the spruce trees, the pine trees. So it's picking up its own unique substance as it comes along.
For nearly 20 years, Glen Ora Distilleries has been exporting North America's only single malt whiskey to the world.
Or single malt whiskey is a whiskey that's made from malted barley only, so you can't have any of the other two cereals in there. And so once the barley comes on site, it's already malted by the time we get it, and then we put it in our mash tun, which is where we add water to it. And from that point, it's almost like a big pot of porridge. It just sort of goes around, and the water extracts the sugar from the cereal. And then that's carried on to the next point, which is the washbacks, where we add yeast to it. And after about 2 to 3 days, the yeast will react with the sugar, and it'll give us about a 9% alcohol. So at this point, it's very much like making a beer, but we're just taking it another step further, and we're putting it in copper pot stills. From that point, it's clear. When we take the spirit out of the still, it's about 70% alcohol. And then we put it in an oak barrel. And after a period of time, that white spirit is going to turn into a golden liquid.
But along the way, Glen Ora has faced incredible challenges, from a tough single malt market and from the single malt establishment of Scotland.
We named our distillery Glen Ora Distillers, and we named our product Glen Breton. And all of our product is called Glen Breton, mainly because of Glen, where we're located. We are in the glen, and a glen is where water collects. And if you look it up in the dictionary, that's basically what you're going to find. It makes sense that we would use Glen as a prefix to our whiskey, but also Breton as in Cape Breton. And we certainly wanted to have that tie in as well, because we're certainly proud of where we do come from and our culture. We've used the name Glen Breton with great pride throughout all our bottling. And then the Scotch Whisky Association, based in Edinburgh, Scotland, felt that we were trying to mislead our market by suggesting that it was a Scottish product by using the word Glen. We took offense to that. We're very proud of where we come from and our culture, and we're not going to let anybody take that away from us. So after 9 years of legal battles, finally we won. The future is looking very good here. We've infiltrated that whiskey world. People are respecting what we do. We have lots of whiskey in the warehouses. We're producing each year, so the future's always 10 years down the road anyways. Each year, like, it's producing such an amazing product that it's always like a great surprise. Like, each year when I come back, it's like running into the warehouse and tasting whiskey and finding out like what happened over a period of time, because I kind of liken it to you know, a child running down the stairs Christmas morning to see what Santa Claus left you under the tree, because it's amazing what can happen and the magic that can happen in a warehouse.
From the Highland coast moving inland, an incredible blanket of colored forests, mountains leading to more mountains. Finally, ascending to the peak of this incredible mountain chain, a vast plateau sits high in the sky. This stretch of wilderness is devoid of human settlement, but a haven for wildlife. The moose, hunted to extinction in this region by 1924, was reintroduced decades later. Today, all moose found here are descendants of the 18 animals released into the wild in the 1940s. With no natural predator, the population has flourished. Today, 5 moose per square kilometer roam these hills. In the heart of Cape Breton Island, high above the steep Highland hills, lies a magnificent, endless plateau, set between the waters of the Atlantic and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. This vast expanse stretches for miles. It is all that remains of an ancient valley plain carved over millions of years by coastal erosion. It is a barren, eerie landscape, more than 300 meters above sea level. With a harsh climate and short growing season, only the balsam fir can grow and survive here. Surrounding the plateau, dozens of hillsides look down on spectacular cliffs, a long stretch of untouched eastern coastline. And among these hillsides is the world-famous Cabot Trail. Nearly 300 kilometers of roadway, twisting and turning around this far-reaching branch of the Appalachian mountain chain. Constructed decades ago, the trail connects the northern communities of Cape Breton that until the 1930s were only accessible by boat. Each year, more than 400,000 visitors drive this route, giving it the reputation as one of the world's top driving destinations. Now on the horizon, the waters of the Gulf of St. Lawrence mark the opposite end of this trail. This is the final destination for visitors seeking the ultimate view. The Skyline Trail, a 7-kilometer hike beginning just off-road and ending with a panoramic view between the Cabot Trail and the sea. Further south is the French settlement of Cheticamp. Spread over 4 kilometers near the end of the Cabot Trail, Cheticamp's 4,000 residents make up the largest French enclave on Cape Breton. It is a fishing town with a strong artistic edge. Cheticamp's hooked rugs are an art form that began a century ago and are slowly becoming known throughout the world.
About maybe 100 years ago, the family women used to wash potato sacks that are made of jute. It's like burlap. They would wash the potato sacks, and the women would just take old pieces of wool clothing and that were worn out and just cut them in strips and hook them like rag rugs. And it was just done to keep the floor warm. They didn't worry about design or anything. They would just do it that way. But human beings being creative, they started getting a little more creative, doing squares, a little geometry. This is the beginning of the whole process. This is where it all starts. This is where we get our color on and everything. So there's this. Now I just have to wet this. From there, I'll have to put the mordant and the dye in there and keep going. This is a tradition that's been going on in the village of Cheticamp for many, many years. I learned from my mother when I was a kid. It's getting more darker. To let it get really dark would take quite a bit of time. So what I would do, if I want it darker, I'll just put more dye. The process of doing the hooked rug is just the burlap gets tightened on a frame. It has to be tightened or it's not going to work. And the design gets drawn on the burlap prior to that. And then you just sit there and you hold your wool underneath, and you take a very fine hook, you put it through every single hole in the fine burlap, and you catch the wool underneath and pull it through every single hole into a small loop. And that's what creates. And the pressure of all the loops being together keeps the rug together. One of the things that makes the Shedicam hooked rug a little more difficult to learn is that it is the fact that we use fine yarn. And each strand has to be pulled out just the right length, otherwise it would make the work very rough. A tapestry was presented to the Pope, one was presented to the Queen, one was presented to Prime Minister Trudeau, and you can still find it in all the gift shops around Shedicamp. You can find it in shops, other parts of Cape Breton, other parts of Nova Scotia. It's very impressive that the Shedicamp hooked rug has been able to survive this long.
Beyond Shedicamp and further southwest, the shores of Lake Ainslie lie in the distance. 20 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide, it is the largest natural freshwater lake in Nova Scotia. Rich farmland lines the shore. Here, along the last few miles of this aerial exploration of Cape Breton's coasts. With more than 10,000 square kilometers, the island of Cape Breton represents just under 20% of the landmass of Nova Scotia. Packed with mystery and beauty, the island has been captivating visitors since the first European explorers arrived in the 1500s. Now, centuries later, Cape Breton continues to make a strong case as the world's favorite island, here on the edge of Canada.